I'll focus a little bit on the essays and the ethics paper. In the sense, I'm not going to give you any tips or suggestions on how you need to structure your essay, but I can only tell you about what are the sources or what are the material that you can use in some way so that it makes your essay stand out from the rest. Now, when it comes to the essay, the usual approach, which is sort of a textbook approach these days, is what is called as a pestle approach. You cover a topic from the political angle, economic angle, science and tech, sociology, legal, environmental. So that way, you're covering all different dimensions and you'll not leave anything to chance that way. But because it's a very standard approach, it might not make your essay stand out. What perhaps the evaluators are looking at, I'm deliberately using the word perhaps because nobody knows what goes in the minds of the people who are evaluating our civil services papers. Nobody knows who are these people evaluating and nobody knows how they're giving the scores, because a person who scored around 140 in the previous attempt can end up with 110. Nobody knows how that can change, because you always expect a person to actually improve, and seeing the scores that way, it's pretty shocking, but nobody knows how the process functions. But anyway, they've included me in the finalists, so I'll say thanks to them and just continue with it. So when it comes to the essay, make sure that you include examples, or you start off your introduction with some sort of tangential angle and converge on the topic. Say, especially when it comes to something like reflective essays, if you are armed with the knowledge of Indian mythology, that can be pretty useful. Like, I remember when we were writing essays here in these mock tests, at one point of time, I don't remember if this is the first attempt or the second attempt, there was a topic which said, Afghanistan has always been an issue to India, or something of that sort. Because at that point of time, again, there were discussions about the Taliban, the discussions about how China is trying to make inroads into Afghanistan, Pakistan's handling of the Taliban and issues like that. So that was the topic. So the usual approach might have been to start off from the historical context of how the British actually tried to cultivate Afghan as a buffer state between the Russian Empire and the British Empire, and how that proved to be an arena for the great game at that point of time, and then how the Russians were part of the great game in Afghanistan in the 1980s when the Soviet invaded Afghanistan and US armed the Taliban and the Mujahideen to fight them, and now currently the US state, how it has engaged itself for the last 40 years and more extensively over the 20 years, and yet it has been defeated, how Afghanistan has once again proven to be a graveyard of empires, right? That is going to be the usual approach. You can use your historical information, facts, analysis, whatever commentators have said. That's fine. That's excellent. That'll give you very good marks. But if you want to make your essay stand out, if you are armed with the knowledge of Indian mythology, what you could possibly do is you can connect it to the Mahabharata, where Shakuni and his family, Gandhari and Shakuni are from Gandhara, which is the present day Kandahar, right? So the Kuru Empire, which was in India, was destroyed because of Shakuni's machinations. So you can say that Afghanistan, even at the time of mythology, has been connected to being a graveyard of empires, even though not in Afghanistan, it proved to be a graveyard of empires in India, right? So that kind of an introduction will make your essay perhaps stand out, and perhaps the evaluator is not even expecting somebody to approach this topic of Afghanistan, which is currently very relevant, very contemporary, from such an angle, right? So if you're armed with this knowledge of mythology, it can help you give examples from elsewhere, and it can help you make your essay stand out a little. You can also look into, stories from the people around you, your own life's experiences. I understand, if you're being brought up in an urban background, an urban setting, most of us here are copy-paste images of each other. Most of our families are alike. Most of us come from a pretty similar background, and when you stay in an urban setting, your life becomes a lot more sophisticated, so you're not exactly able to see through people or get into those experiences which perhaps people had, say, 2 or 3 decades ago. When I listen to my parents or my uncle speak, I sometimes wonder whether we get to meet such characters, people who lived by their instinct, and that actually gives you a lot of experience, that actually gives you a lot of stuff to write about. But in an urban setting where all of us are sophisticated, you don't get that kind of stories which you can possibly quote in your essays. But try to be on the lookout for stories from people around you, stories that you've heard from people around you, so that you can use that and quote. Anyway, the UPSC is not going to verify whether the story you're saying is authentic or not. All they want is a good story that is on paper and how attractively you're going to present it, right? So try to find out such stories. And yes, watching movies can also be a very good way to develop perspectives, develop your personality, especially when it comes to reflective essays. I'm not advocating that you watch the regular masala Bollywood movies. That's still okay, you can watch it for entertainment once in a while. But if you really want to develop perspectives, if you really want to, go a little offbeat and make your essay stand out, watch what is called as parallel cinema in India. Primarily because the parallel cinema does not have a major audience, it's of the mainstream. There are directors like the movies that you can watch, like those of Satyajit Ray or Shyam Benegal, or if you are from Kerala, Adur Gopal Krishnan, you might have heard of his name, or for those from Karnataka, Girish Kasarwadi. Now, these are movies which require you to prepare mentally before you watch those movies to some extent, and it is going to be a thought-provoking process as you watch the movie. And even after you've watched the movie, they'll leave you with some questions, they'll leave you with some answers, but they'll make you think. Ultimately, what UPSC or the Civil Services exam is looking for is people who can think and people who can present them well. So watching parallel cinema, it can be Indian or it can even be foreign movies. I haven't explored foreign movies yet, so I can't give you examples of the directors from there. But if you can watch such parallel cinema, that will help you broaden your perspectives. And especially when it comes to, say, your interview stage, once you've cleared the mains, you need not have to mention that watching movies is your hobby, but the ideas that you get from there can always be utilized in answering some of the questions. You can say, if it's a question related to sociology, movies that Satyajit Ray made, they're relevant they were relevant in the 60s and 70s, they're still relevant today, right? So these are the kind of movies or the examples that you can actually use to bolster your answers. So maybe exploring parallel cinema might be a good option. And if you actually want to discuss once you watch these movies, maybe you can form a group, if not for the combined study thing, at least a weekend you can spend watching movies and discuss over it, because a lot of ideas get exchanged once you discuss after watching movies, right? I was lucky that this time the interviews got postponed by so much time. So I think between April to June I watched nearly 58 to 60 movies thanks to OTT, almost a movie every night, and most of the movies were from the parallel cinema, so that helped in some way. And now I know that I can speak with confidence when somebody speaks of Satyajit Ray. I did not do this for the 5 years I was in Kolkata. I did it after coming back. I don't know why, but that happened. Anyway, so there is another source which might help you with your ethics and your essay answers. That is the Speaking Tree column that comes as part of the Times of India paper. You can still access Speaking Tree online, but the daily articles that come as part of the Times of India paper, that can be pretty useful, because that gives you a spiritual touch, or that gives you a philosophical touch to your perspective, to your answers, which can help in your ethics and your essay papers, especially in the reflective essays. So these are some of the sources which might help you if you can refer, but make sure that you dedicate some time to it. It can take time to get used to this process of referring to these different sources, because usually we are not tuned to look at that or to think once we have seen such sources. So let the effort, let it grow organically. Don't hurry, don't rush, and even if you think that you're not understanding it at the first attempt, don't give up, right? This not giving up attitude holds true for the entire civil services journey, but it holds even more truer when you look at referring to such sources which we are not usually used to. Even I faced that difficulties when I initially had to refer to the speaking tree or refer to these movies or articles. But it takes time, it evolves, and rest assured that if you do this regularly, by the time you write your mains exam in 2022 or you face your interview in 2022-23, you will be thoroughly well prepared and you'll be extremely confident that you have hit all the right sources, and you're well armed with the knowledge and the confidence that it can give you, right? Another question that I would just like to address briefly. Okay, let me pause here, and in case there are any questions, let us take it right away, because by the end of the session, even you might have forgotten of what you want to ask. In case there are any questions, feel free, because I don't know, I might be younger than quite a few people here, so there's no need to feel hindered thinking that this person is a little old. I can still pass off as a high school student if I go, but anyway, continue. Any questions? Yeah? That is a gamble that you'll have to take, just like the entire civil services journey. It's a gamble that all of us are taking, right? So I think just the introductory part of your essay, I think it's a much smaller gamble when compared to the entire years that we are devoting to this journey. And usually if you're quoting from mythology, what it usually shows is that a sense of being grounded. You know your culture, you know where you're coming from, right? So that sort of an attitude, that sort of because you're not there personally to meet him and explain what you've written, but saying that, okay, I know this from my mythology, it means that, okay, there's a sense of grounding in this person, he knows his background, he knows his culture. That can help, that can, even if he does not entirely understand what you're referring to, at least this aspect might be useful in some way. And just make sure that the examples that you quote are quite famous, like say Shakuni's example, or say Karna and Duryodhana's example, or maybe Hanuman's example. Like there's the story, right? Hanuman was very playful as a child, so the gods cursed him that you are going to forget your strength until the right time comes. And Hanuman is reminded of that only when they reach the shores of the Indian coast, and when he has to fly across to Lanka. Everybody is contemplating as to who can do that, who can cross the seas, and that is the time when Jambavan says, okay, Hanuman, you have your strength. Remember who you are, remember what your strengths are. So that you can say that all of us as individuals have talents. It only takes time to actually for that to get expressed, and at some point of time we need some motivation to actually bring that out. So if you can relate it in that sense, if you can relate these popular stories and make an argument around it, a rational argument around it, then it's still going to fly.